been
Sorry.
I've been messing about with data for about 30 years, as I like to describe my career. Primarily in third sector, charity higher education. And my background behind that was Big Four consultancy. Uh, but now I work primarily in UKHE, which has its own set of challenges. So it's always good to work with Nicola. We've known each other for years, done lots of collaborative work together because Nicola's got experience of lots of other sectors. So hopefully we can bring some different viewpoints, some different kind of challenges that we both see every day. Yes, that's me. So I hand you back to Nicola.
Excellent, thank you. So, yeah, my name is Nicola Askham. I'm known as the data governance coach. I think, as Alex said, I've been doing data governance for nearly 22 years now, across a whole host of sectors. And, it occurs to me that for me and Alex, when we're talking, that perhaps doing data governance is easier for us because we've had this conversation rather a lot of times. However, whenever I go to conferences or I'm doing training courses, it's the question that comes up time and time again. So we decided to do this as one of our free masterclasses. I can't remember if it was 2 years ago we first did it, or
Must
maybe
have been.
longer. Time flies when you're having fun. But it had come up again a lot quite recently. I've actually been asked by a software vendor to host a breakfast briefing in a few weeks' time in London, where it's actually the topic. So it just felt like it's obviously something that people are still struggling with. And we just thought it was a really good time to perhaps redo another live one of these. So the plan is Alex and I are going to talk because we like doing that. But what we want to do is hear from you too. So please, if you've got questions as we go along, pop them in the chat. Generally, I think you're all being pretty good, but if you can keep yourselves muted, feel free to put your cameras on. Those of you that were here earlier will know we quite like to see that there's real people listening to us, not that you've just logged in and walked away and gone and get a cup of tea or something. Um, and actually, just being really nosy, I'd love to, introductions. If you want to, we haven't got time to, obviously, we could spend the whole call with you all coming on off mute. But if you could just perhaps pop in the chat who you are, say hello, and perhaps tell us where you are in the world, because I find that is always interesting.
Yeah, always good.
So, whilst everybody is hopefully, sorry, I just needed to mute. There was a bit of noise there. I had to mute a couple of people. So, because I didn't know who was making the noise. So I think we should start off with a question, and I'm going to ask you the question, Alex. So the fact that so many people have turned up kind of just reinforces what we know. Making the case for data governance is hard. So
Yeah.
I think we ought to kind of address that one first off and say, why is making a business case for data governance just so hard?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to kind of answer that in a couple of ways. First, by saying you shouldn't really make the case for data governance, which may sound a bit non-intuitive since you're on a business. How do we make a business case for DG? But and I'm also going to answer that question by saying, has it got better? So Nicola and I have been running this workshop a couple of years. I don't know how many times we've done it, and increasingly we get asked, has AI made a difference? Generative AI, has that made a difference for the case for DG? And we're going to kind of cover that off through the session. I mean, the answer is kind of yes and no in my view. And I mean, Nicola and I have got slightly different views on this, but certainly in terms of where with the things not to do, the joys of been doing it a long time. It's like, here's a load of things that you shouldn't do. One of the things is it's really hard to make the case for a thing that nobody really understands what it does. And when you think about data governance and you think about the outcomes of something like a very successful data governance operating model, an accountability model, somewhere where you've got a kind of sustainable and respected sort of use of data around the concept of ownership, stewardship, quality logs, business glossaries, kind of all of the things that we would associate with a successful sort of sustainable, stable data governance operating model or data governance framework. Um, it's quite hard to explain those to people before they exist because they kind of think it's going on already. One of the things about data governance for me is it's really in support of what the organization wants to do. And this is really why it's really hard to do in higher education because the universities are not a single organization or a brand in which there's many different agendas, often competing agendas for money, for people, for time. And so the idea that there's some kind of cookie cutter business case that you can make is it's nonsense. And it's very hard to get the attention of very senior people when you're talking to them about things that they don't really understand. And one of the reasons they don't understand that, one of the reasons why it's hard to make the business case is that uh, a lot of the data governance stuff is kind of not exciting. It's not the shiny. It's not, we're going to unleash AI. We're going to create all these new data products. We're going to do all these amazing things with data that we can see our competitors and other sectors doing. It's the thing that enables that. But it's sometimes really hard to get people's attention because they're kind of focused on the shiny and they kind of think this thing happens. And one of the things that the kind of the axioms that you kind of live by when you do data, I'm sure it's the same for you, is the higher up the organization you get, the better you think the data is. And the reason for that, I think, is quite obvious, is that, senior people, they've probably got more people working for them. They ask for something and we don't tell them it takes 2 weeks to pull these 93 things together and make this report. So they don't live this world of kind of data chaos. I mean, the Wild West. I'm sure you've heard all of these things. So what we need to do with business case is we need to kind of get them on the same page as they would be if we were talking about things that they do care about. So, we hear data is an asset, and I always say, well, talk is cheap, right? So if we want to make data as an asset, we've got to kind of put it at the same level as finance, as people, as building, as intellectual property, whatever your organization cares about. We need to say data is the same as that. It's got the same power to change things. You've got to configure it, you've got to invest in it, you've got to trust it, you've got to respect it, you've got to have behaviors around it, as all these other assets do. So we tend to think of four challenges that you need to get over. One is that we've kind of touched on it, is it's very complex. Data is very complex. There's not a simple solution. Senior people go, what do I need to do? It's like, well, that kind of depends. It's not really helpful. So there's a lot of things. Do we focus on data quality? Do we focus on literacy? Do we focus on this part of the organization, that part of the organization? So you kind of need a message that's very tailored to your organization. That's going to capture what people care about. Because there's not a lot of understanding. When you talk to people about data governance, it's two words that people really struggle with. They hear data governance, they think about GDPR in the UK, or sort of, some kind of data police, as Nicola calls them, some kind of thing that's very technical. Maybe that's about buying new servers or something. So just the understanding of the concept is really difficult for people. It's quite hard to measure return on investment because it's an enabler. So we always use words like accelerate, unblock, facilitate, enable. We don't say make the data better because that's a good thing. We say improve the quality of the data through governance because it'll allow you to be more successful in these things that you've already committed to. And the final thing we would say is you've got to get over the resistance to change, because a lot of people kind of have got jobs wrangling data, kind of doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, system X to system Y, swivel chair integration. They're the only person that knows about this type of customer information. They're the only people that understands these reports. And when you say to them, we're going to get rid of all this, we want to do more automation, we want to make democratized data, we want to remove what we call data proxies, having to go through people to get to the data, they kind of go, that's my job. Right? And you'll be staggered, or maybe you wouldn't be, how difficult it is when people think that and how hard it is to get people to change. So that's kind of why it's sort of hard to sort of sell DG. So kind of what's the kind of upside on that? How do you kind of do that? So really there's kind of two things you really want to keep in mind. One is anything that you talk about when you talk about building a capability around data governance is it's got to support something your organization really cares about. And it's got to be measured to do that. So if it's about attracting new customers, if it's about improving a product, if it's about facilitating some financial savings, if it's about doing some of the staff workforce, that you've got to say this is what you've committed to do publicly, or at least to our company, and this is what the data does to support that, and it's currently here, And if you want it to be an asset, if you want it to be, it's got to be here, right? So what we're doing is we're saying we're going to make this thing happen for you. Right? We're not going to talk about what this thing is. We're just going to say this is what you need to do. So it's making people convinced of that. And the other thing is, and this is the hardest thing, is just don't chase everything because often we see people going, oh, this is where AI is a good example. So we say, oh, we're doing an AI pilot. So in HE, we do a lot of stuff around understanding how students learn. So what we do is we go, oh, we've got all this, we're going to unleash AI on our attendance and on our assessments, and we need data governance for that. And you've got to be super careful because these projects often crash and burn, and you get associated with them. And it's like, well, that data governance thing was no good, was it? Because that project failed. And also, often they're going at such a pace that actually getting data governance established, the establishment phase, governance, accountability, owners and stewards, you can't just spin that up in 10 minutes. So I think it's about kind of playing to the long-term goals of the organization and being extremely clear about saying, by doing this, we're going to enable something that you already care about or is on the horizon. So that's kind of my view on it, Nicola.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I felt a bit mean. I was doing a training course, and I ended up writing doing a video on it because I kind of felt like I picked on somebody in a training course because I was asking them, what they thought the benefits of data governance were, and they were doing well, we'll have ownership and we'll have better quality data, and in the end, I just said to this person what you and I have had said to us probably in the early phases of our career, which is, so what?
Yeah.
Our senior executives, our organizations do not want data governance. They want what it will give them. Yeah. So if we go around saying, oh, we'll do this framework and roles and responsibilities and we'll have better quality data, you're going to get the kind of answers that I've had. So I helped an investment bank to make the case for data governance a couple of years ago. And as part of that, I was going around with their data governance manager, interviewing senior stakeholders. And one of the interviews was with what you'd consider a stereotypical investment banker, how you would imagine this old chap who puffed himself out and went, Nicola, we have had, our bank has existed for 250 years. We are incredibly successful. We have never had data governance, and I don't see why we need it now. And it kind of, that is a, very over the top reaction, but it's what everybody's thinking when we say, let's do data governance. So we can't say, let's do data governance. It's all got to be about what are we going to help you do. So talk in terms of things that people really care about. So just to kind of reinforce what Alex was saying there. So we've talked a lot about what we can't do. It's more important to try and think about what we can do. So when I do my training courses, I do have a slide with some typical benefits, but you can't just copy and paste those into a business case. I've in the early days of doing data governance, I very naively, and I tried this a number of times before I worked out it really wasn't working, was I would meet you and I would say, if you let us do data governance, we're going to save you money, make you more efficient. It's, I promise you I will. And I've never lied when I say that. But then somebody goes, okay, so what problems are you going to solve? How much money are you going to save? And when will that happen? And I go, well, you need to let me start doing data governance first so that I can, then I'll find the problems. And because I don't know what the problems are yet, I can't tell you when I'm going to fix them and how much I'm going to save. You can see how that really doesn't make a very good business case. So these generic benefits are things that we will get, but we're not going to actually, use them to make the business case. And I think you've had, similar experiences, haven't you, Alex?
Yeah, very much so. I get asked about once a week, can you give me a generic business case or a generic data strategy? I'm like, yeah, I can give it to you. It won't do you any good because the only thing I would add, everything Nicola's just said, completely agree with. The only thing I would add, rather than repeating what Nicola said, is often, and I don't know what it's like in the industry that you work in, but we have a lot of consultants in HE. And they've heard all this stuff before. They've heard we're going to save you money. We've heard we're going to make you make better decisions. We're going to we're going to improve your data culture. You're going to make your data driven. They've heard all this stuff, right? And not much has come out of it. We have a big thing about digital transformation in HE, and honestly, it's just like it's just words, right? Nothing's happening. So I think that what I say to people is, I give you a framework, and we'll show you one at the end, but you've got to be specific. It's got to be your narrative, your tone of voice. The amount of some of the work I do is I review people's data governance failures. It's not actually much fun, and often it's because they've had people in that have written these kind of strategies, and it's like, that's not going to enfranchise anybody who works here. Those words that you've used mean nothing to the person that's struggling day in, day out trying to find the right data. They're not going to change. They're not going to get on board with this, because what you're telling them is not the values of the organization, or in my case, the university. So I think one of the things, so the idea of a generic thing that somehow espouses the values, which are very nuanced and very different in every organization, is nonsense. And if anybody ever says to you, I've got a business case, can you just put your name on top of it? Don't get involved with that, because you'll crash and burn.
Absolutely. Oops, I've got to put somebody on mute.
So I think now we've kind of depressed everybody with how hard it is, Nicola. I think I'm going to ask you the difficult question now of, okay, we kind of said what it isn't. Let's have a go at what it is. What kind of things are you going to put in that business case that's going to convince that person you were talking about that this thing is going to be something that's worth investing in?
No, it's a good question. I love the fact you kind of gave me the difficult one.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this enough that I think we are very much aligned on our approach. And for me, I think there's like 5 principles for a successful data governance business case. So firstly, I would say that you've got to have something about why you're doing data governance. So some clarity on the purpose and the scope. So picking up on what we've already been talking about, we've got to have some clear objectives. Why are we doing this? What are we hoping to achieve? And also that what's the scope? We're both well known for saying you can't do everything at once. Some of the data in your organization will probably never get data governance on it because it's not important enough. It's never used. So we've got to find some way of limiting the scope to something that's important. So, and as Alex says, it's something that's your organization cares about. So perhaps you're putting in a new CRM system or a new ERP system, then perhaps you say, well, it's going to be important to actually support that by doing data governance, so that we realize our investment in our new system by making sure the data that goes into it is correct. I'm sure you have had what we have seen loads of times over the years. Shiny new system goes in, rubbish old data gets shoved in, and then the business are really surprised that the magic tool hasn't fixed it. So that's one way. There's all sorts of different ways you can choose, but don't try to do everything. Make it feel manageable. If you put too much in your business case at once, it's just going to say it's too big, it's going to fail. But if you, as Alex said, tie your purpose and your scope of it initially to something that they are doing anyway and that they care about, and basically sell the fact that the other thing that they care about won't be successful without you, you're onto a much better thing. But I would put in there as well that make it clear this is the scope for the initial phases. Make it clear that this is not we're only doing it on this and that the rest of the data can be rubbish. This is just where we're starting and proving it. So what's next on the list? I think we need to have I can't even speak. It's too late. It's been a long week. Executive sponsorship. We need a high-level sponsor who is going to support us, champion data governance, and it's absolutely critical to have that person. And I think we need them named and shamed in the business case. They've got to be standing behind you enough that they're happy for their name, and perhaps they can even put some supporting words in it for you. But we can't do this without executive sponsorship. I tried in the early years. I don't know whether you did as well, Alex. You can get so far with sheer energy and enthusiasm, but sooner or later somebody will say, yeah, there's this other big program happening, Nicola. It was fun while it lasted, but I'm just going to go and do this. We really need somebody driving it from on high. And the other thing, while I'm thinking executive sponsorship, is it doesn't have to be a CDO. I think there's so much stuff on LinkedIn and Google and elsewhere these days that everybody seems to be obsessed with the fact you must have a CDO. And if you don't have a CDO, people are then convinced we can't possibly be successful. Well, CDOs have only really been around, I don't know, I should have looked it up or asked ChatGPT something useful like that. But well, I would guess, what would you say, Alex, 8, 9 years? I've been doing data governance nearly 22. They didn't exist, and I did manage to be successful. Maybe not the first couple of years, but I did make, without them, it just has to be somebody really senior to sponsor it. It really makes a big difference. So the next one, I think we've been talking around it a lot already, but always good to call it out so that you have a clear principle, is alignment with your organization's corporate strategy. Alex was mentioning data strategies in your examples earlier. We're not meaning that. Go all the way back to what is your organization trying to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years. Interestingly, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago where somebody said she won't do her strategy for more than 3 years anymore. Because things are changing too fast thanks to AI, that from a data point of view, we can't possibly guess what we're going to be doing at that point. But you do need, even if your organization has a really good data strategy in place, you need to use in your business case for data governance, you need to be spelling out how it supports your organization achieve its business strategy. And it really doesn't take you long to get a copy of your strategy. It's probably on your intranet or Teams or SharePoint, wherever these days. Look at the objectives, and with your knowledge of data at your organization, understand, can we achieve that with our data as it currently is? Because I would love to say you would be able to tick off every single one of them and say you need data governance to do this. I think that's unlikely. I've never yet managed that, and the number of times I've done it, but you're going to find a number of them. And the senior people that we need to sign this off and support us are responsible for delivering that strategy. They're not responsible for delivering the data strategy. So this is why we have to align it all the way back to the business strategy. And if you have a good data strategy, somebody's already done that work and linked that back to your business strategy. But we need to make this business case as easy as possible for somebody to sign off. We don't need them to have to go and read the data strategy and see how it goes back to your business strategy. They need to actually just have it spelled out for them. Just make it simple and easy. So the next one is challenging. So this is going to be your return on investment or your cost benefit analysis. Now, I got into data governance by accident by being a project manager for a number of data warehouse projects. And I've done loads of business cases for projects, and always the ROI, cost benefit analysis, it was always a standard section on the template at the bank I worked at. This is really hard for data governance because of what I already said. We will solve problems, but I don't entirely know when and how. So it's not an easy one to complete, and we have to find some way of doing it because we've got to prove that we're going to deliver some value. And the way I like to do this is I call it data quality horror stories, or any other data horror stories. You don't need to track down everyone in your organization, but you need to go and find some instances, whether it's been fixed now or whether it's still live, but where poor data is causing problems for your organization. And then you can start to show that if this is just one team and we found this, imagine what it's like across the organization. Remember, you WhatsApped me about one, was it a couple of years ago, where you did that, Alex? And you only did a minimal amount of work and found loads of wasted time and effort.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 52 places cleaning the same piece of data.
So you can imagine we have great fun in our WhatsApp messages going, oh my God, you never guess what this client's doing. So, but you need to go and find some of your instances. You don't need to find loads. I think in an ideal world, you probably want to find at least one for every of the key functions at your organization. So like finance, HR, because what you really want is the people signing this off to have at least one thing there that will resonate with them and that will interest them. So make sure you've got a broad brush of that, and that's useful. And then the last thing, and always hard, nobody ever said that data governance was easy, did they? Is some measurable outcomes. We can't do data governance and just say, well, wasn't that good? The trouble with this is that the longer we do data governance, the harder it gets to measure what we do because we stop things going wrong in the first place. But when we first start, almost like sorting out the, I suppose, historic mess. And I always hesitate to use the word mess. And this is probably something else to think about in the actual words and your choice of language in your business case is, I know I'm an eternal optimist, but I think that the vast majority of people don't come to work to do a deliberately bad job. People didn't make the decisions that they made with data or do the things they do with data to make our lives deliberately difficult now. They did it to get their job done at the time. And then they've trained the next person that this is how we do it, and the next, and it becomes kind of common law. This is what we do. So, going around saying our organization's a nightmare, everybody's idiots, nobody knows how to do data will not win you any friends and get support for your business case. I do think what we need to do is start saying, we're aware of these things. Now we're becoming a lot more aware about how important data is, the fact that it's an asset. And then you can use that make sure you use that tone of language when you're talking about it. And, how are we going to measure what we've done? I'm trying to think, my brain's gone absolutely blank. Can you think of any particular outcomes that you've put in a business case?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to, put it into kind of four sections. So one of the things that we talk about is staff motivation, which is often missed, so it's not a hard and fast, and you can get it through staff survey and stuff like that. But certainly, again, in the sector I work at, motivation is very poor at the moment. So it's this idea of somebody so we say to quite senior people, all senior people, we say, do you think it's right that at your university somebody's spending an hour a day wangling data? Because it either means that they're working an hour a day you're not paying them for, it's not in the job role, or that they're doing an hour a day less than what's in the job role. How do you feel about that? Because you're kind of in charge of the university, so maybe you should care about this stuff. And also, obviously, it's not just about the time, it's about how demotivating it is looking for data, trying to find it, cleaning it, all this kind of stuff. So we do talk about staff motivation. We talk about customer experience, in this case, primarily student experience. It's a harder thing to measure. Staff motivation is definitely an easy thing to measure. Efficiency, I think, again, is an easiest thing to measure. I mean, you can, like Nicola says, work on any old hooky metrics and create some enormous numbers. But, there are things where people say, well, this used to take a week and now it takes a day. And but actually, that's not the outcome. The outcome is now it takes a day. This is what's changed for us or for the students or for the researchers, for the regulators, the funders. So I think it's making sure that anything where you can have some kind of quantitative benefit, it's not the benefit, it's what the benefit means. It's a bit like saying we're not doing DG, we're supporting the business. It's a bit like saying we've made an improvement, this is what it's done for the business. We then talk about better decision making, which is really hard to do. But again, it's about some of that's just literacy. Some of that's saying to people, if you want 80% accuracy tomorrow, you can have that. You want 100%, that takes a month. So people go, well, I'll take 80%. So sometimes there's no work. It's just a thing to explain to people that it's not press a button and get the number. And then there's, depending on which, less so in HE, but certainly where I used to work in finance, stuff around risk, Nicola, reducing risk, looking at the risk registers, saying, well, these are very data-y. We can actually do a mitigation action. We can reduce the score from a 12 to an 8. They're probably the four areas that I would think about.
Yeah, you saying about the staff engagement made me think of a client I was doing. I was actually doing training for, but it's amazing what you talk about while you're prepping for the training and, and delivering it. But they were rolling out data governance because of staff turnover rates. And I went, that's a new one. Why? Yeah. And the sector they're in is, I think the general image is that they have lots of money, so therefore they must have every swish techie tool that they need. However, this particular company hasn't been investing in their technology. And there's an awful lot of work still done on spreadsheets and manual data entry and manual analysis. And people that are coming to their organization from other organizations that have invested more in the tools and technology are just absolutely astounded and are saying, well, hang on a minute, I didn't come here to be a data entry person or whatever. And so, they were leaving incredibly quickly, some before their probation periods.
Wow.
And that was the feedback that was coming up time and time again, was that the data was really bad at this organization. So, it's not always the obvious places that you find these. There are There are all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, but I think that comes back to the fact that it's got to be about your organization, doesn't it? It's got to be in using language that your organization uses. And I think that comes back to the thing about you don't have a generic, there's not a cookie cutter. Because if there was, this would be a 5-minute webinar, wouldn't it? We'd just say do that.
Yes. Yeah, here's the standard template, or just download it here and fill it in.
But
Yeah,
we do kind of have a template which we're very happy to
we
share with
do.
you. And if you get in touch, we can send you a PDF of. I'm going to just put it up on the screen for
Yes,
you
please
now.
do.
I'm going to put it up on the screen. See, this is kind of yeah, okay. Okay, I haven't used this much. I don't use Zoom much. Oh God, it's going to make me do something, Nicola, that I can't do
Okay.
because it's going to say to me that I've got to allow Zoom, and that means I'm going to have to do some kind of reboot, I think, because I haven't
Ah,
used it for so long. Sorry, I should have said
Zoom's been up there.
we should have tested this before.
So
But
actually, it's a template that just kind of has the things that we've been talking through, hasn't it? The area.
yeah, if I do something like WhatsApp it to you super quick, do you want to
You
put it
do
on
that,
the
I'll
screen?
share it
All
then.
right. Okay, we're gonna just use some we're gonna just use some a bit of this. See, this is very classic though, isn't it? This is kind of workaround tech. This is what people do with data. You
It
know,
is.
when I used to work in finance, I think it was when it's Solvency 2 or Starbucks, can't remember whichever one it was years ago, came in after Enron. Nicola know better than me, is they locked down everything. Everything got locked down. You could only work with this data in this way. And they just drove everything onto USB sticks. People just leave them on trains, client details. There was any technology that you use to lock stuff down, there'll be a free technology to make you beat it. So can you share that, Nicola?
I will. This is good. Yeah. I've got a lovely automation set up. Was it a picture?
Yeah.
Okay, it'd be in my images folder then. I've got a
Okay.
lovely automation that puts pictures into my images folder, and as soon as I open the downloads folder, it wasn't there.
Wow.
Just going, oh, great.
Yeah.
Best laid plans. Right, let me share, and I will be able to share it. Which is there.
I'm just reading Maria's comment. Yeah, I agree with that.
Hey, right, can you see that?
Yay! Cool. All
We
right.
got there.
So
There's always more than one way around it.
So this is one I've written for AG, but I think it's pretty similar. And I'm not going to go through all of it because we've kind of talked about it. I think the important thing about when you're creating your business case is hopefully some of this will be helpful because you should pick and choose. Often you have a format that you have to follow, a document often. But I would test your business case in a couple of ways. One is which ones of these do you think are the most important? Because you may decide we don't need to do them all. And the ones that are important, have I answered these questions? So this is the way that I test business cases that I get asked to review or the ones that I write myself. I try and make my business cases with a lot of brevity. I mean, one of the things that we've noticed in ChatGPT is when I review business cases for people, how long they are. And it's because people aren't writing them anymore. They're just doing ChatGPT. And you could so tell. I mean, I think it's a really dangerous thing to do because you really can tell. And it goes against everything Nicola and I said about it being authentic and in your tone of voice. So I think, actually working on your business case to be really focused. It's so easy to say we're going to be all things to all people. Like Nicola was saying earlier, you've got to pick your scope. So I think the kind of most important boxes here are the first and the last. The first being about what is it? Just kind of how do I summarize this in a page? The old elevator conversation. How do I summarize this in a page? Why, what, who, how, but also why now? Why is it so important for me to do this now? Why was it important to answer the question from that Nicola's client? We've been successful for 200 years. Why is it important to do it now? If you can't make a good case for that in a summary, then your business case isn't strong enough, in my view. And then I think it's just a very simple, just a narrative that you're saying. So you start off obviously with why are we, what are we trying to do? What is it? What's our vision for data and how does that enable our strategic intent? What are we not going to do? What's something that's really important in HE is what is everybody else doing? What's the groups that are aligned to us? What are the groups who are our competitors? What are they doing? What benefits are they seeing? That's always very effective. Early on, saying who needs to be involved, what kind of things do they need, what skills do we need, what kind of gaps have we got, being really honest that this is not, because, generally to data governance, it's not a question of getting 100 new staff. It's often getting people to work differently, to do the right thing, make the right thing the easy thing. So I think it's really important to have that stuff in early. what's the cost, the RI stuff that Nicola's talked about, hardest bit for me. And then a little bit of the what and the how. What are we going to do? What's it going to look like? How are we going to track it? When are we going to see some benefits? What impacts it got? And then, what do we want data culture? How do we want people to behave? What do we want them to be? Do we want to do differently? How are we going to enable them to do that rather than just telling them? And then this why now thing. And then the last thing for me is the second most important thing, which is uh, the second way to test your business case is when somebody says, "Yep, Nicola, brilliant business case. We're going to just take that forward," like happens almost never. Then the next question that I've been asked loads of times, it must be on some kind of like senior management training, is they always get said, "What are the first 5 things you're going to do?" So you need to be able to answer that. What are the first 5 things you're going to do? If you get your business case approved, got to be ready with that and say, if you approve this, here's what I'm going to start doing next week. Okay. So that for me is kind of a whistle stop tour and a good way for you to test your own business case. But don't think this is the template that you need. Think about what it is that you want to do and maybe use this to help you check whether or not you've got you've kind of asked all the right questions that you may be asked while you're presenting this. So I kind of built this slide up from questions that I've been asked when I've been presenting business cases. So it's really kind of reverse engineered to try and get me in front of some questions that maybe I hadn't prepared well enough for when developing business cases earlier in my career. So that's all I was going to talk about there, Nicola.
Excellent. No, I think that's really useful. Thank you, Alex. So we've got we were planning to finish around the 45 minutes mark. So we've got time to answer questions if anybody has them. While people are typing their questions, I was just going to pick up on what you were saying about ChatGPT, because I do think it can be very valuable if used in the right way. And I agree. Do not ask it, a prompt like go and write me a business case for data governance or anything generic like that. Also, be very wary because ChatGPT thinks that data security and data privacy are
Oh, doesn't it just?
Because, as you all know, ChatGPT looks at everything on the internet and not everything on the internet about data governance is correct. However, I have found it can make us very productive, and you might have Copilot or something similar, internally that you can use. But I was thinking when you were talking about it, how I would use it if I was doing a business case. So it wasn't a business case, but just a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a data governance review for a client. And a bit like Alex has got his little template there for doing a business case, I've got a list of questions that I'm trying to cover. And I've been writing up or typing up my notes, and I now have this very lengthy Word document that is an absolute nightmare, and there's bits all over the place about various different things. And to be fair, I tend to write a lot of documents like that. It's a brain dump, or as I collect stuff and information from people. But what I actually did was copy and pasted the words into ChatGPT, and I asked it to summarize things. Or I'd ask it questions. I'd say, what are the key points about a maturity assessment? I think that could be really valuable. However, word of warning, everything you put in ChatGPT that's a public ChatGPT goes on the internet. So do not put anything confidential. Don't put your company name. Don't put anything else like that in it. But you can use it. So I didn't let ChatGPT write my report, but I saved significant time letting it help me sort my notes out.
I think that's a really good point, because I do that as well. I'm the same as you. I write really long documents. So I say, summarize this in a page, or consider me a senior executive. What 4 points? And sometimes I really think, well, I don't agree with that. So I go back to my own notes, think I've written the right thing. Or I just think ChatGPT has just been rubbish this time. But I think it's a good way. It's as a productivity aid, I completely agree. As a content creator, I'm less convinced. I mean, both Nicola and I are seeing business case for AI now. People talking about data governance, business case for AI. We were talking about this earlier. We said we're having the same conversation we were having about analytics, MI, data lakes, data warehouses. It's the same conversation. You've got to decide on the scope. You've got to decide what your quality rules are. You need to work out how you're going to. It's no different, really. I mean, it's just a different shiny thing at the top, but it does give you more opportunity, because everybody's doing it, I think, to talk about data governance. And because AI is kind of predicated on data, the link is maybe a bit closer than sometimes you see for things like, oh, we want to build a new building. It's like, well, the data is really important, is it? But AI, people understand it's predicated. So I think that puts us in a slightly stronger position to be able to present this kind of business case. But I don't actually think the template changes. I don't think what we do changes a great deal. But we might be a little bit closer because people are understanding that, bad data in, bad data out.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of excitement about Gen AI. Everybody's got Gen AI in their pocket now on their phone, whether they realize it or not. So I think executives are kind of pushing for Gen AI to be adopted in their organizations without really understanding everything. So it was actually about making the case for data governance. I was talking to a prospective client that I've been speaking to on and off for a while because they're struggling to make the case. But they've recently had a new CTO join the company, and she found out that the ladies I've been talking to have been trying to make the case for data governance, and she's become their ally. She's gone, we absolutely need this. And I had a call with her a couple of weeks ago, and she said that she literally was in her office, and the CEO stuck her head around the door and went, "Oh, how's it all going? You've been here 5 weeks now." And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm getting my head around the lay of the land and what's what here." And she went, "Oh, great. Do you think you could give some thought to us adopting Gen AI then?" And the CTO said, "What is it you want to do on Gen AI, which a lot of people don't know?" And she kind of went, "Well, I think we need it to remain competitive because our competitors are starting to adopt it." And she said, and this CTO said she just had to say to her, "Look, we need to talk about the data first. Your data's in a terrible mess. And I don't think we could be thinking about doing AI using that data and getting useful results from it." So I think it is really helping us, make the case for data governance, and all the analysts. I went to Gartner event earlier in the year, and they're saying it's time to stop talking about doing data governance and doing data governance, usually in the same sentence as AI. So it's really interesting time at the moment. So we have a question.
I think the answer to that is that's a different webinar.
Yeah, that one is.
That's a whole 45-minute conversation about this is very much about low code, high impact tools.
Yeah, very much so. Or perhaps that'll be another one in the
I
future.
think that's yeah, I'm afraid that was a slightly longer answer than
We've
we have.
probably got time for a quick question or two if anybody's got any questions, or have we just scared you off trying to do a business case for data governance, but hopefully given you some tips on how to go about it.
Ownership.
So Kate.
Yes, I mean, again, short answer to what assigning owners and stewards is a real it does take some skill. I mean, there's I'm going to be my 30 seconds answer is yes, it's difficult. There's two generally ways that I do it. I either get the stewards really excited about it, so when I talk to the owners, they're already kind of invested in it, or I make sure the owners fully understand that there's value for them doing it. It's not just about them kind of taking on more responsibility for no value for their function. They're kind of the two ways, or a combination of the two. It's definitely difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and it usually comes after the business case. I am just trying. I think I've got a blog or something on it. I'm just searching my resources sheet.
Oh, you definitely have. Yeah, you have. Yeah,
I've written so many blogs now. I can't remember what I've written. All
right, let me have a look.
I've got resources sheet.
Have we got a template for a data dictionary glossary for finance organization? I don't. I mean, there's probably generic template.
Hey, Nicola, I have a question. This is Vishal Devasam.
Go for it.
Yeah. So how do you weave the privacy angle into a data governance conversation? Because, especially with Gen AI and everything else that is going on, new regulation coming through.
Well, I would say that data privacy is a different thing entirely from data governance. So data governance helps you meet some of the privacy requirements. So I might include that in a business case if perhaps your organization is struggling to meet some of its regulatory requirements for data privacy. But I wouldn't so much try and use it in the same conversation. It just confuses users. It's better if your data protection team talks about that and the data governance team talks about data governance.
Sure. The reason I ask is from a data classification perspective, somewhere around the data teams are involved. So I just wanted to ensure that folks understand there is a fine intersection and how would we bring it up? Because once you start the privacy talk, all the stakeholders start to take notice. So just wanted to see what you say.
Yeah, so I would say you need to talk to your privacy team, because you shouldn't be raising the topic. You need them to be your ambassadors to say, well, we need data governance to do this, if that makes if that makes sense.
Good. Thank you.
And I've got behind on things. I haven't. I think I have a blog on data ownership, finding data owners, but I don't actually think I've published it yet. So that'd be one to look out for.
Can I just give an input on the point we just discussed?
Yeah, of course, Eddie.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because what you just said, like, to me sounded a bit like we're separating, data privacy from data governance, while at the same time the data governance is the kind of the monitoring and control aspect of the whole data management, hands-on work that we do. So I do see a point in connecting that. Unfortunately, what I often see is that, data privacy and, information classification, things like that, start running faster than the other disciplines, right? And start establishing their own organization. While in reality, governing data means governing all aspects of it, which includes privacy, right?
No, I'd have to. I'd have to just disagree, Eddie. Data governance does not include privacy. It's and I think there's unfortunately not very wrong stuff on the internet about it. And data governance is the framework and roles and responsibilities about understanding your data. It's very closely aligned to data quality, needs to be aligned with data privacy and data protection, but your data governance team should not be doing that.
Yeah, I agree. We talk about three lenses. So to finish on this, our view is that you've got business use of data, which I think is data governance. You've got information governance or privacy, compliance, regulatory stuff, which is generally over there. Then you've got kind of technical data architecture, all that stuff. And there is definitely intersections. It's Venn. But when we talk about governance, it's why when we see stuff on ChatGPT around security and other stuff that we don't agree, is we're talking about the business making best use of the data that it's got by improving the quality in terms of its outcomes. And the other stuff matters, but it matters. It's a different lens. And I think if you try and get your owners and stewards, who are generally kind of quality people, to be thinking about that stuff, you're going to really struggle. And certainly we've seen that you try and give people all of those lenses and say you're the owner or you're the steward for that, you're not going to get a lot of traction. That's my view.
No, my point wasn't about saying that you have the ownership. My point is that privacy in itself becomes a requirement holder against data governance, right? So it affects how do you ensure good privacy unless you have good data quality, for example, right? So my point is governance, like if you look at the word, means, as you said, getting in control of your data. And why do you want to do that? To achieve good business results, because that's the final thing, right? But I think disconnecting them is maybe not that you use it in a case, but we shouldn't disconnect them either, right? You still need data governance to be able to do privacy in a good way, because roles and responsibilities is not just about the roles and responsibilities of the roles of data owners or data domain owners or stewards. It's also about the other roles that are necessary for proper data management.
So I get that, Eddie, but I think you're trying to make data governance be all things data management, and it's not. I think you're right. And I think Vishal made a good point in the meeting chat, is that, you've got to make sure that your data governance is aligned to data privacy. And I think it needs to support the data privacy approach. You need to be working closely with them. But I think what Vishal said is about a partnership with the privacy folks. And I think that's a good way of putting it. But it's not down to the data governance people to be doing data privacy. If that's the driver for doing data governance in your organization, that's fine. But that's the only, you have to use it as the driver for making the case, not saying that this is a data governance thing. And I'd also really over time, you will give your data owners and data stewards lots of roles that come from lots of other data management disciplines, including data protection, data security. But we don't want to tell them this all up front because, as Kate said in her message, it's hard enough to get them to sign up in the first place. So, but we are going really off topic.
We are.
What these actual Zoom was for them out. But it's been really lovely. Thank you all for coming. We are well, we've run over time a little bit. I hope you have found it useful. We have recorded this, so I will make it available if you want to go back and revisit any parts. I think anything else that there's left to say that I've forgotten, Alex?
I don't think so. I think other than the only last thing I would say is if you are developing a business case, it can be quite lonely. Just surround yourself by sort of critical friends. Get people to look at it, improve it before you kind of set it out there. So don't think you have to do it all on your own. The more you share it, the more rounded it will be, the more questions it will answer before it goes further on, would be my last piece of advice.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, everybody. And hope you found that useful.
Cool. Thanks all.